Welcome to lecture 27 of the lecture series Psychology of Well-being. Well, in the previous lecture, we looked at the post-disaster well-being and mental health. Well, in this lecture, we are going to look at post-disaster well-being and mental health, particularly in the context of political violence. And we'll be looking at the political violence in Nandigram, West Bengal, India, that affected the lives of farmers way back in 2007, 8, and even today. So, what are the important elements that we are going to look at in this particular lecture? That will be continued in the next lecture also. So, we are going to first of all set the context of political violence and the potential threat to well being and mental health. In the socio-historical context of one of such violence, that's political violence of Nandigram, and the relevance of studying suffering and healing experiences of survivors. And finally, the methodology used in the study we'll be looking at, and we'll be explaining or elaborating on the findings of this particular study that focused on the experiences of suffering and healing in the next lecture. So, political violence and potential threat to well being and mental health becomes important as one of the studies by Pedersen and his colleagues have pointed out, have observed that when assessing the overall mental health impact of exposure to protected forms of extreme violence in civilian populations, we argue for the need to move beyond the limited notion of post traumatic stress disorder, which is a useful but restrictive medical category, failing to encompass the myriad of signals of distress, suffering, and affliction, as well as other culture bound trauma related disorders and long term sequelae of traumatic experiences. So, why it becomes important to look at the threat to coherence of selfhood or well being that is inflicted upon by the political violence, and it becomes important that we move beyond just the symptom based understanding of survivors' plight. The importance is to look at that how in the everyday life the person struggles to have a sense of selfhood owing to the impact of political violence and its aftermath. So, as Summerfield further points out or notes, what is fundamental is the role of social will, invariably targeted in today's total war, and yet embodying the collective capacity of survivor population to mourn, endure, and rebuild. So, social world that's targeted, that gets damaged, paradoxically also has the capacity to help people mourn, endure, and rebuild. So it becomes important that we locate distress within such kind of social or cultural worlds of people or the context of people. It is hoped that increasing recognition of political violence and man made violence as being of major public health concern will play a part in promoting a more peaceful world. So that Zui and Ugalde tell us about the need to study the post disaster or post violence suffering and mental health, suffering and healing experiences of survivors. Well, what is the socio historical context of political violence in Nandigram? General justification of special economic zones in India, as pointed out by several scholars, tell us that as per the Special Economic Zones Act 2005 in India, it was justified only if these also serve as these means the special economic zones also serve as engine of growth, employment generation, and infrastructural development, besides export expansion. Other major problems associated with such SEZs or special economic zones are question mark over attracting more foreign direct investment, missing background linkages between zones and non-zones, and often land being acquired by the government from the unwilling farmers. I beg your pardon, there is one typographical error there. It should be from the unwilling farmers. In West Bengal, the ruling political party, that's Communist Party of India, Marxist, CPIM, eschewed its own ideological stance on rural reforms and Panchayati Raj. So decentralization was something which was the ideological stand of the ruling political party, that but it betrayed its own ideological stand on decentralization and giving more choices to people to exercise in terms of deciding their modes of livelihood or supporting them towards that. Well, from SEZs to violence, how it all occurred. So Nandigram is a rural area in East Mednipur district of West Bengal, which has been the center of peasant resistance against an attempt by the government to acquire agricultural land for setting up a special economic zone as part of a larger plan for a chemical hub in the area. The total area of Nandigram, all the three blocks, is about 413 square kilometers, while the population is 4 lakh. Um, yes, 439,000 um, population. There is again some typo there. I beg your pardon for that. So population again is something which is quite huge, 4,39,000. The total area earmarked, I beg your pardon, for land acquisition as part of proposed SEZ projects is 10,000 acres. However, this land is spread over an area of about 60 kilometers, which is home to a population of about 95,000, covering 5 gram panchayats or local village governments. The main villages in this area are Bhangavera, Sonachura, South Khali, Maheshpur, Gokulnagar, Adhikaripara. Muslims and lower caste Hindus dominate the population. Well, some critical events while we try to understand how the SEZs led to the political violence. Well, on 14th November 2006, a report published in the Statesman newspaper said Nandigram gets Singur jitters. Now, Singur is again a place where the government wanted to forcibly take away the land of people for building some factories. 16 November 2006, the ruling party cadres, along with others, protest against the government plan of land acquisition. This is something very interesting because the local ruling party cadres themselves went against their own government's plan of land acquisition. That is 16 November 2006. However, 28 December 2006, notice of land acquisition by Haldia Development Authority comes in. So a formal notice comes in for land acquisition from the local government. Well, violence begins 7 January 2007, 5 deaths. 14 March 2007, 14 deaths, several cases of violence, sexual violence. 7 November 2007, 9 deaths, several cases of sexual violence and burning of houses. And this has been the geographical area that we have been talking about. So, again, near the Bay of Bengal, we find that this particular land, which was at the crux of the entire violence, which was at the center of the entire violence. So, different parts of that rural area is earmarked here, and we find that the study was conducted in the southern part of this particular land, just near the Khejuri village across the Talpati Canal. And Sonachura village was the place where the study was conducted. So it is somewhere uh, near this area that the study was conducted. Okay, so moving ahead, we find that there's this relevance of utilizing the concepts of suffering and healing to try and study people's plight, because again, we find that the decades long adherence to or belief in decentralization that was conceived by people as the way of life, that was something that was damaged, and it had its own impact on the rhythm of life or the sense of selfhood of the people. So, recapitulating what suffering is, people can suffer from what they have lost of themselves in relation to the world of objects, events, and relationships that we had understood. Most generally, suffering can be defined as a state of severe distress associated with events that threaten the coherence of person. The relief of suffering, it would appear, is considered to be important for patients and general public, but not for the medical professionals, medical profession rather. So with that, we also know that healing is about empathic witnessing of or essential commitment to be with someone who is suffering may facilitate his or her building of an illness narrative that will make sense of and give value to his or her experience, and that's mediated by the cultural beliefs and values. So, with that, with these conceptual frameworks, the study was conducted uh, in the Sonachura village of Nandigram, and semi-structured interviews of 8 male survivors were conducted. Field notes or the non-verbal behavior of participants, daily life activities of people. These were noted down. And secondary data, that is a report of the tribunal that was set on the violence, a legal tribunal consisting of the retired judges of High Court or different courts in India. And so the report from that was also uh, studied in order to make sense of survivor suffering and healing. And constructivist grounded theory analysis was taken up using initial focused and axial coding, utilized not only utilizing not only the narratives but also the context in which people underwent such experiences. Well, the social constructionist epistemology, which tends to locate people's experiences within the context and assumes that such experiences are continuously or continually shaped by the context. New cross-cultural psychiatry that locates the experiences of well-being and mental health within cultural and sociopolitical context was taken as broad meta-theoretical framework or concept or analytic framework. Well, with the help of such an analysis, different aspects of survivor suffering could come to the fore. Although we will elaborate on this in the next lecture, but it's important that we get a glimpse of that here. Experiences of post traumatic stress symptoms or PTS symptoms like re experiencing, avoidance, and sleep disturbances. Then feeling betrayed and fear of its future recurrence, betrayed by neighbors or fellow villagers, and betrayed by a sense of betrayal by the government. Feeling overwhelmed by the loss, and relational disruption, struggle with the changed social roles. Now, categories of experiences of healing. Well, we understand that how the cultural norms may become important and could also provide a sense of meaning and value to the person. So, adhering to cultural values amidst crisis provides a sense of reaffirmation of selfhood that yes, the way I experience my life is worth it or it is meaningful. And outsiders' recognition of movement's worth. So, it provided a sense of reaffirmation of selfhood to the person. Collective identity was another way in which uh, healing process could be understood. And sense of security due to political change was one such thing, one such aspect. And besides that, we find that different ways in which suffering and healing could take place. And we will elaborate upon that in the next lecture. Thanks very much.